Okay, here are 5 impossible questions. I like to ask my students these in Intro to Media, Cultural Studies, more advanced Communication Studies classes to get conversations going and also to introduce certain important concepts. So the first question, where did your phone come from? Now by this I don't mean the Apple Store, Google, Amazon, and I also don't mean places, China or California. What I'm interested in is if you can actually trace the phone from your hands back to where it came from. I offer immediate A in my Intro to Media class if students can do this. No one's ever been able to do this. I would love to see somebody. I wait for that day, and I use it to introduce the idea of commodity fetishism. While we may have vague notions, we can't trace these things back, which means we can't really know who at Foxconn was working on this, who in the Congo was mining coltan for this, and that's something we should all probably spend more time thinking about. Second question, can you find the economy? I use this to introduce the idea of reification from Hungarian Marxist theorist Georg Lukács. People can talk about the economy, they can tell us whether the economy is doing well, how the economy has gone up or down, but if you ask someone to find the economy, they can't. What they can find is the S&P, the Dow Jones, employment, unemployment numbers. The economy doesn't really exist. It's a concept that we use to simplify a bunch of complex things, and it's also used against people because while you could say that the US economy has risen steadily over the past 3, 4, 5 decades, that doesn't actually answer how people are doing. That's an important idea related to reification. Next, maybe a little simpler, can you identify these characters? Pause it here for a second, see how you do. Okay, that's not the impossible question though. The impossible question is, can you identify these characters? Now, while technically not impossible, I've never had a class, I've never even had a friend or a colleague who could name everyone in a picture like this. And again, you could look these things up, but I think it's an important element when we talk about the public sphere, representation, democracy. Why is it that we can name 50 animated characters that don't exist, but can barely name a dozen people who run the world effectively? There are a lot of things we can talk about. That's why I bring it up. Next question. Can you draw a penny from memory? Now, this is another one that's not technically impossible, but I've rarely, if ever, seen people successfully draw a penny. And you may be thinking, well, I don't use pennies, I'm all digital now, or I'm Canadian, I don't have pennies anymore. So can you draw then the credit card that you use most often? Just the front of the credit card. Chances are you can't do that either, which makes us consider the illusion of knowledge, the idea that because we're exposed to things, we know how they work. Most people can't draw a penny, most people can't draw their credit card. Exposure to things does not equal knowledge, and that's an important and humbling idea that was introduced to me and that I like to introduce to other people. Finally, how many times would it take, theoretically, to fold a thin piece of paper, like the kind they print Bible pages on, if you could fold it indefinitely, forever? How many folds would it take to get to the size of the moon? It's really astonishing to think about the implications of this. I won't give you the exact answer, but I promise you it is much lower than you would have guessed. And that's because of exponential growth, which is related to a lot of our technology, a lot of our economic practices, a lot of the things that we deal with on a regular basis now, which our brains simply aren't wired to think about. We think about linear growth, like 1 year to the next. We don't think about doubling or quadrupling, depending on the situation. And so look this up. I promise you, you won't be disappointed. So those are 5 relatively impossible questions. I love to ask my students these questions in various classes because it always sparks a really interesting debate, introduces a lot of interesting ideas. I encourage you to think about them, and if you have any impossible questions you want to share, send them my way. Okay, since you're still here, one more bonus impossible question. Is this a pipe?